Board Member Spelling. Board Member Patel. Here. Alternate Board Member Spinella.
Here.
Board Member Becker. Present. Chair Melendez. Here. For the record, Vice Chair Garcia and Joyce Price. Now please rise to the pledge of allegiance.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As you all hear, do you have any board comments and announcements? And that we have not a break this month, but in August. But I hope everybody has a good holiday break celebrating Independence Day. I believe we may have public comments, so we'll go ahead and call that out. Queen Sharman.
Good afternoon, directors, grade staff. My name is Wayne Sharman. I'm a resident of Solana Beach. Solana Beach has long been a beacon of environmental leadership in San Diego County, from community energy choice formation, including our role in founding the precursor to the Clean Energy Alliance, the Solana Energy Alliance. We are consistently chosen, you all have consistently chosen the more challenging path or the conformist one. Today, I'm asking you to rise again. The Clean Energy Alliance has been a meaningful step forward, giving our community a voice and where our energy or power comes from. But procurement is only half the equation. Fire that delivers that power still belongs to SDG&E. And that monopoly on distribution is where the residents continue to be held hostage. The electricity system serving our residents is failing us, and the failure is not subtle. SDG&E has filed for an 8% rate increase that, if approved, will push more than today's 1 in 4 ratepayers into energy poverty, unable to pay their bills on time. That is not an abstraction. That is our neighbor. That is our family in this region, choosing between groceries and keeping the lights on. And I saw it in my place in the city of San Diego, a woman with income talking about this very matter. The question tonight or today is not whether the status quo is acceptable. It clearly is not. The question is what the Clean Energy Alliance and all of us is willing to do about it. There is a model worth our attention. Ann Arbor, Michigan has authorized parallel electrical infrastructure. Parallel electric infrastructure. Essentially the right to run a secondary cable in the public right of way, connecting buildings, routing electricity the way the internet routes data, openly, competitively, resiliently. The European Union has embraced this framework under the Energy Communities Directive, empowering neighborhoods and municipalities to own and share locally generated power. And I would add that the state of Oregon has passed legislation for this exact same purpose. This is not a fringe idea. It is the logical next step beyond what the Clean Energy Alliance started, completing the loop from clean power procurement all the way to local community controlled distribution. I'm almost finished. The internet didn't wait for the phone company to give permission to connect people. Clean, local, affordable electricity shouldn't have to wait either. We have the platform, the credibility, and the community support to make this happen. I implore you to study this model, adopt what works, and once again, put the Clean Energy Alliance on the right side of history.
Thank you, sir, for this comment. One take step back and make sure our agenda is approved for this afternoon. Greg, did you have any changes to the agenda?
No, Chair,
We need a vote to approve the agenda. So no changes to the agenda. We do need a vote to approve the minutes. No motion to approve. So, motion is second, please vote. Board members Heller? Board member Bucktown? Aye. Alternate board member Sanal?
Yes.
Board member Becker? Yes. Chair Milano? Yes. Thank you. Now we have a presentation from the student process. Councilmember Bucktown, Councilmember. Great, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. I won't read the entire proclamation since I know that'll take some time. I do have a few words I'd love to say, and then maybe I'll just read snippets of it, and then we can get back to our agenda. So I know the exciting part is that 5 years ago, North County had the opportunity to make a bold choice, and they really, that was all of us, which is really exciting. And we obviously have had an opportunity to take control of our energy future and invest in something cleaner, smarter, and more local. And I have to say that it's been fun to celebrate over the course of the last month. I know Clean Energy Alliance has really delivered on its promise. Our residents and businesses have access to cleaner energy, and we've done it in a way while staying competitive on rates. I would say that's not easy, and it doesn't happen by accident, and that's thanks to our staff who's been working really hard, and of course to everyone else who's been really making sure that we're advocating at every level to make sure that we're doing everything we can for our ratepayers. What I'm most proud of is that North County didn't wait for anyone to lead. It was us, and I have to thank, of course, Long Beach for taking that lead and then bringing us along. We came together with our neighbors, we made a long-term commitment, and 5 years later, you can see the results. And so to the CEA team, our partner cities, and every resident who signed it up, thank you. And I will go ahead and read a little snippet on behalf of our city. So whereas the city of Carlsbad is a proud member of Clean Energy Alliance, a locally governed community choice energy provider, and whereas CEA was formed in 2019 and began serving customers on May 1st, 2021, providing clean electricity and customer choice to the city of Carlsbad and other North San Diego County communities. And I'm going to go to the bottom here. Whereas CEA has demonstrated strong fiscal responsibility, achieving a net positive position and providing rate relief to customers, and it has committed approximately $750 million towards new renewable energy projects and supported the development of 190 megawatts of renewable energy and 197 megawatts of battery storage. Therefore, and it says the mayor, but I'll go ahead and say my name, Priyavat Patel, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Carlsbad, on behalf of the City Council, would like to recognize the 5-year anniversary. So thank you for allowing us the opportunity, and really excited to celebrate with everyone. Thanks. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I would love to get some photos together. Maybe we can get Greg and any other staff that would like to join for a photo. Thank you, Carlsbad, for that presentation.
Oh, board is welcome as well. Yeah, how doing? You mentioned you. Thank you for your. Bye. Hello. You get in the middle. You get in the middle. Oh, are we okay? We're all getting in here. Okay. Eric, what are you doing? Come on, alternate. Let's do it. What are we looking at? Are we maybe? Cut off my shoes. I was not dressed for that. Yeah. I will see that in the newsletter. That's so sweet. I appreciate that. Coffee.
We're still focusing, you know. I many cities have been able to acknowledge it, and it's really special to be able to recognize that. Thank you. Now we'll move forward with our consent calendar. We have a number of items here, a total of 5 items. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Second. The motion is second, please vote.
Board Member Spelling. Board Member Bontemps. Aye. Alternate Board Member Sanella.
Yes.
Alternate Board Member Joyce. Board Member Becker.
Yes.
Chair Melendez.
Yes. Thank you. Now we will move on to reports, starting with our report from the CEO, Board Meeting.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. This is going to be an overview of our statistics to this point. I'm going to go through most of this relatively quickly. Most are familiar with this. We want to highlight that we're now over 257,000 customer accounts. And so see that Premium Pack Plus, the default product, 75% carbon free is our highest enrollment. Still maintaining a high 93% participation rate. Here. The staff is continuing to be active in our communities. Here's some events that we participated in over the last month or so. And you can see, I'd like to highlight that we are trying to hit every city, and we've been very active in every city. While 5 of the 7 cities are shown in this slide in our coming up events, you can see that we've hit all 7. So again, just trying to make sure that we're out in the community, getting word out, and thank our staff for their active engagement and continuing to inform customers about Clean Energy Alliance, our programs, and some of the benefits we can provide. To that end, that is. So to that end, in terms of customer education, we held 2 webinars recently on May 21st. These were primarily focused at getting customers to understand their bill, how to read their bill, how to find it, bill assistance options, as well as CEA programs, including the recently approved rate relief credit that went into effect for our customers on February 1st. And we provided that information, that we can't provide information to you. You can see these webinars to customers even after the fact via these QR codes in both English and Spanish. And the webinars were conducted in both. Again, just an update on our programs. We're still seeing quite a bit of activity and engagement with our Solar Plus, Battery Bonus, and our Connect versions of those programs. Good news is we're starting to get some interest in the Battery Bonus without the SCHIP funded Battery Bonus Connect side of the program. And both the Solar Plus Connect and Solar Plus have active enrollment in implementing those programs. This is just a reminder of the funding that we did allocate for the benefit of our income eligible customers from the self-generation incentive program funding, otherwise known as SCHIP. And you can see there the allocations over $2 million of funding for our income eligible customers in service territory. Another program that we've talked about quite a bit is our P Smart Savers. It's a demand response program. Although we'd like to see a little bit more enrollment, we're up to 55 people. We did extend it for another year. This is the demand response program for avoiding use on peak times during the high heat, high usage events that we call. And if the predictions are accurate, we may see quite a few of those this summer, given what we're hearing about the weather forecasts. Our rate relief credit that I mentioned earlier has seen opt-downs of 148, 2 of which are commercial, since the rollout of that program on February 1st. So it's steady, not exceedingly high, but steady, and that's encouraging to see that not a lot, but also quite a few are getting information about how they can save some money on their bills. Also wanted to highlight that we met with the Risk Oversight Committee on June 16th this month. Staff, as typical, provided an update on our portfolio, including energy hedges, how we're meeting our renewable, carbon-free, resource adequacy, and incremental capacity obligations. We're looking very good at this point to meet the remaining 2026 power supply needs across all of those categories. We also, at the March meeting of the Risk Oversight Committee, provided additional information on our interest in moving forward with prepayment bonds. You will see that information continue to come to the full board as it becomes necessary. We are interested in moving forward with that and generating savings, significant savings, hopefully for customers as well as the CEA. And staff intends to give a full report on this item, the Risk Oversight Committee at our July 30th board meeting. So we look forward to that. And the next Risk Oversight Committee, as we meet quarterly, is scheduled for September 3rd. And that concludes the CEO report. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. I'll see if there's any questions from the board as well. But I had a quick one about the webinar. So we've had ongoing discussions about education, funding for programs, and the needs for more public information as how people can reduce their energy costs. For this webinar that was held in May, was there a particular funding source for that activity? Was it part of our education programs?
Yeah, there was no funding directly associated for that webinar conducting that webinar. However, we did make mention of programs that are available for our customers to save money, not just customers of CEA. All customers of CEA are SDG&E customers, but SDG&E also has programs that customers can take advantage of. So we did not limit the information to programs that we can provide for cost savings, but also to advise them and make sure the public is aware of how to take advantage of things like CARE program, the FARA program, as well as the medical baseline program, and beyond that, arrearage management plans, how to get into a payment plan if you do have a late payment.
Fantastic. And so the webinar, we've held a few of those.
Yes.
Yeah. And it sounds like, you know, effort from the whole team to share some communication with the public. Is there a particular cadence that we're in with these webinars?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a regular cadence. I think we try to provide them as needed. I think as we implement the energy programs plan, we're likely going to conduct more to make sure that the public is getting the information, both in English and Spanish. I think that's a good way to engage with customers. We did have quite a high enrollment for those webinars. Unfortunately, or otherwise, the actual attendance was less, but because we made them available on the YouTube site, that there's still an option for people to see those, see the webinars and take advantage of the information. So again, not a regular cadence, but we are planning to do more.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you. Thanks for the presentation and the community outreach that you all have been conducting. Questions around that? Just have you all had an opportunity to look into our concerts in the park that Carlsbad does on Fridays during the summer? We have about 9 of them. I just want to throw that out there as an opportunity for maybe next year.
Thank you. We are aware of those. I don't know that we've exactly engaged in that. That's an opportunity for outreach, but we appreciate the information. We're always happy to go to the concert.
Great.
But to also get the information out.
Yeah, usually it's a great way to engage. I know that we have other folks that are usually there from the community. Public services comes out and we'll talk about services they provide. But whoever is out there, they tend to have like an activity for the families and just a good way to get people engaged. So just wanted to throw that out there as a possibility. I know, if I'm not mistaken, you all have been to farmers markets before as well, right? The reason why I was saying is I've been seeing a lot about farmers market, North City ones, because they seem to have a lot of, and I think think you all have hit that. I was just wanting to confirm that, if I'm not mistaken, yeah. Okay, because, I was going to say, I'm guessing it's not just in Northwest that's getting up all the, there are people from all over that come to any of our farmers markets, so I just wanted to make sure that, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you for the discussion. Let's go ahead and move on to our next item, in compliance with AB 2561, the status of vacancies, recruitment and retention efforts. This is a public hearing.
Thank you. Sharon and members of the board, this is our annual report to the board required, as the chair said, under Assembly Bill 2561. It's required to report out on the status of vacancies, recruitment, and retention efforts. The public hearing is intended to be conducted prior to the adoption of the budget. You will see the budget later in this meeting. So we typically schedule these, the first we scheduled, the required one last year, and this is the second. And also during the hearing, labor groups are invited to attend. We don't currently have a recognized labor group, but almost all our employees attend these meetings. So we'll definitely attend via virtual participation. And yes, so I'll just move into the report. So for fiscal year 25-26, we had 6 vacancies filled, and then 1 position was created following the recruitment in the prior year. So a total of 7 positions in this fiscal year. You can see them listed there. They were all new positions. They were all hired, and they are all still employees with CEA. The board will be asked to approve during the budget and authorize 4 additional positions in the next fiscal year. We have identified 3 of those positions: one, a race and specialist or analyst, a marketing specialist or analyst, an HR position, and the 4th position is as yet undetermined. We'll assess our personnel needs as we go through the fiscal year. Staff will, of course, report on these vacancies and recruitments periodically throughout the next fiscal year, and then, of course, at the annual AB 2561 hearing. We do conduct an extensive and deliberative recruitment process, and it's designed to attract and select the most highly qualified candidates. We have been successful in doing that, and dare I say, all of them are highly qualified, and we're happy to have them all here. We began the fiscal year, this current fiscal year, with 10 full-time employees, and we now have a total of 17 full-time employees. And we've had no turnover in the last fiscal year. Our retention efforts are to offer competitive wages, benefits, technology allowance, flexible spending account, vacation, and 11 paid holidays, including the winter break. And we've been quite successful in filling the vacant positions, as I mentioned, and retaining those employees. As such, we're not recommending any changes to our procedures and recruitment and retention of employees. So we recommend that you conduct a public hearing and accept this report. The status of the employee, take the serious recruitment and retention efforts, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. The public hearing is open. We have any speakers.
We don't have any speakers. Ask from the board.
There's support on this item. I would rather move that we close the public hearing and accept your recommendations. Okay. The motion is.
Board Member Spanish. Board Member Palpatine. Aye. Alternate Board Member Miller. Alternate Board Member Joyce.
Aye.
Board Member Parker.
Yes.
Vice Chair Malone. Chairman.
Next, we'll move on to new business for the regulatory update.
Thank you, and I believe we have Tim Mendel online to go ahead and do the presentation. Tim.
Thank you, Greg. If we can advance a couple slides for us, please. All right. Oh, just back to the first slide of the overview. Chair Melendez, members, thank you for the opportunity to present to you all again. My name is Tim Wendell. I'm a partner at Keys & Fox. Today, we're going to talk about the PCIA rulemaking, and we're also going to talk about what the first public comment discussed, SDG&E filing its phase 1 general rate case. Next slide, please. Digging into the PCIA docket, there are 3 tracks to this docket. The first one ended a year ago. The second one is ongoing, with hearings having taken place on June 2nd. Recall from a couple of months ago that this track asks whether renewable energy attributes that SDG&E procured back before 2019 and then banked to use for later bundled customer compliance should count as a valued attribute in SDG&E's portfolio, which would reduce PCIA rates. Opening briefs were filed last week on that issue, and reply briefs are being filed in the next hour or two. Next steps here will be a proposed decision and then oral argument on that proposed decision. We anticipate that in August. The third track of the case will consider a broader set of reforms to the PCIA methodology, and the Commission kicked that third track off during the first week of June with some workshops, first and second week of June with some workshops, and then we have some comments coming up that are due as well. Next slide, please. At those workshops, the Commission considered first on day 1 how the Commission should think about indifference from a blank slate. On day 2, they talked about what changes to the current methodology should be in scope and following what priority. And on day 3, they talked about how CCAs and other parties can have the data they need in order to litigate the case. Callie flew up from Carlsbad and attended for Clean Energy Alliance. I was there not only on CEA's behalf, but on behalf of all of the CCAs via CalCCA. The workshops went as they typically do. Most of the talking was done by the subject matter experts, the lawyers like me, the commissioners, and the judge for the case. With regard to day 1, parties largely fell into 2 camps. Those, like many CCAs, want the Commission to consider ideas that would move away from the PCIA in favor of alternate ways of achieving indifference, advocated for a broader scope to the proceeding. Those, like the IOUs, that want the Commission to keep the current PCIA and only make small tweaks to it, advocated for a narrower scope to the proceeding. On day 2, addressing the existing PCIA methodology, parties have made a laundry list of issues that remain unresolved with this current methodology, including things that we've spoken about before, such as vintaging, when resources leave the PCI stack, how much longer your constituents will have to pay the PCIA, things like modifications to the benchmarks for renewable energy and capacity, and changes to how the utilities optimize their portfolios so that they're not sticking us with unwarranted stranded costs. On day 3, we talked about the incredibly scintillating topic of IOU data and how we can get access to the IOU data. We advocated for broad access to their data. They disagreed with us. Then they wanted our data. It was a pretty contentious day of hearings or of a workshop. It got a little ugly at times. It was not the best workshop I've ever been a part of on day 3 there. What happens next is the Commission will accept comments from the parties on July 9th and July 16th in terms of what should be in scope in this case, and then we'll get a scoping ruling for track 3. All right, next slide, please. Right. The way utilities make their money is by determining the capital investments they need to make in a certain year, and then they earn a return on those capital investments. Many of those capital investments, including poles and wires and investments in their generation resources, are approved in their general rate cases. The phase 1 general rate case takes those capital investments, the O&M expenses the utility will incur, and the utility's approved rate of return, puts them all into a bucket and asks for approval of that revenue requirement for a test year, in this case, 2028. Their phase 2 general rate case asks how rates should be designed to recover those costs equitably among different classes of customers. So phase 1 asks how big should the pie be? Phase 2 asks how can we equitably divide that pie among different customers? On June 15th, SDG&E filed their phase one general rate case, which will set revenue requirements for 2028. And then based on what's called an attrition rate for 2029, 2030, and 2031. So this is a quadrennial proceeding. This happens once every 4 years to set rates for a future 4 years. SDG&E requested $72 million over its 2027 revenue requirement, which will bring it to just shy of $3 billion per year, effective on January 1st, 2028. That's just the electric side, not the gas side. Next slide, please. Previous slide, please. Some of the investments SDG&E is looking to make include $314 million in capital for wildfire mitigation and vegetation management, large investments in distribution, capital, and O&M, large investments in grid modernization, and large investments in generation. And that generation includes $12.1 million for 2 battery energy storage systems as well. It's not clear whether those battery energy storage systems would be recovered through the PCIA. That's something we'll certainly take a look at over the course of the case. Next slide, please. As the public speaker noted, we will see rate increases in 2028 stemming from SDG&E's proposed rates. So this is under the current rate design before the phase 2 actually takes place. You'll see 5% increase across the system. Residential customers will see 7.5% rate increases. If this is adopted, small commercial will see something similar, 7.1% as well. With the chair's blessing, happy to take any questions on any of these issues.
Thank you, Tim. Anyone have any questions for Tim?
I did have one curiosity. I really appreciate you following so diligently the PCIA discussion. And I understand how PCAs would like an alternative. And IOUs would like to keep our current PCA structure. What do the subject matter experts say that were present at this?
Can you repeat the end of that question? I'm having a little trouble hearing in the room. But what are the subject matter experts? And then I lost the end of it. Apologies.
What is your response to this discussion? What are the subject matter experts? What are they presenting on?
Right. So the subject matter experts are hired by the different parties. So they tend to adopt the positions of those parties, and they educate those parties as well. So it's what everybody on that side essentially thinks is the right way to move forward. The PCIA in many ways is working well for the utilities. So they want to keep the current structure. They recently got changes that made our PCIA rates go up pretty significantly with regard to the RA benchmark. They would like to see similar changes to the RPS benchmark. And they have spent the last 5 or 6 years strategically setting their procurement policies with the idea that the PCIA is going to be there and is going to exist moving forward. So that is what they want to see continue to happen. That's no secret. They've said that at the workshops, and the workshops are public. Some of the CCAs, some other folks are exploring other ideas, such as, instead of having to worry about things like benchmarks, which are hard to plan around, what if we were just allocated the attributes from the utilities resources while we pay for the cost of those resources? There are discussions around buying down or buying out your PCI obligations. So look, just tell us what we owe you over, using an in perpetuity calculation, and we can finance around that. And the certainty of knowing what we would owe you is something that we can plan around more successfully than a PCIA that just bops up and down year after year. These are some of the ideas that the subject matter experts are bringing forward. We haven't even gotten to the point where we're talking about those ideas yet. What the commission is asking at this point is simply, what should be in scope? What are things we should be talking about? Should we be reconsidering the PCIA, or should we only be talking about tweaks to the current methodology?
Thanks, Tim. I have a question about if you or someone else has the opportunity to scrutinize contracts that SPG is bringing forward about battery storage or grid maintenance, wildfire, and what incentive do they have to be the lowest bidder or be conservative on their costs on that?
Yeah. We certainly have the ability to scrutinize contracts on the procurement side. So things related to them buying and selling power, things related to their utility-owned generation, which wouldn't be a contract, of course, that would just be costs that they propose. And we do that in the era of compliance proceedings. We go back and we make sure that they're managing their contracts appropriately. With regard to things like wildfire mitigation, the truth of the matter is the system that we have has an implicit bias towards the utilities spending and building things. It's called a CapEx bias, a bias towards capital expenditures, because that's how they make their money. You get a 10% return on all the capital that you purchase. That is, or it's not 10%, but it's around that area. And that goes into rates. And if you over recover, you pay back to customers. If you under recover, customers pay it back on the back end. So there isn't much in terms of an inherent incentive for the utility to spend less. And in fact, the incentive is for them to always be spending and building more because that increases their profit. That said, there are advocates in these cases that will push back on the need for the utility to spend money on these costs. Those are people like me on behalf of CCA customers. It also includes the Utility Reform Network, Cal Advocates. In the San Diego area, you have UCAN and other advocates that will go in and say, look, this is ridiculous. We're paying the highest electricity rates in the country. How are rates going up by another 7.5%? And we take all those arguments to the commission and we hopefully get these rate increases down.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. We don't need any action on this item, but we appreciate your report. Thank you. Now we'll move on to item 9, considering adoption of Clean Energy Alliance Integrated Resource Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Dan Eckham, our power supply team senior manager, who will be covering this item. Dan.
Good morning, everyone. Dan Eckham, senior manager. I'm going to be talking through our integrated resource plan for closer. Better. Okay. I'm going to be talking through our integrated resource plan for 2026, which we are submitting for board approval today and would be submitted to the CPUC as one of our various regulatory compliance obligations. And I'll end this presentation what we're planning to submit, the overall process, and some general components to our plan that we're proposing. So SB 350, which is the broader 2045 emissions and renewable energy bill for the state, requires us and every other load serving entity, CIOUs, other CCAs to file an IRP every 2 years typically, although the last one we had to do was back in 2022, the gap between the last two. And these plans need to show our specific plan towards helping the state achieve its sort of mid to long-term renewable goals and also greenhouse gas reduction goals through 2040. The way that the sort of structure works is we develop a plan, which the board would be approving, and it has a couple of different sort of components that it's optimizing across. One is it needs to meet those statewide goals, and sort of our portion of the statewide goals, both in terms of the renewable content, getting to 60% renewable by 2030, and also the greenhouse gas reductions component by 2030 and then going out. Beyond that, it needs to show that we have a mix, a sort of diversified portfolio of resources, long-term and short-term contracts, and it also needs to meet the state's reliability goals, or reliability requirements for the overall grids. That's resource We're submitting this IRP for approval today. It is important to note that this is a plan that we're submitting at this point in time. It's possible we're looking out to 2045 that things could change a lot in terms of expectations around load growth, what the grid looks like, what types of resources are available. So we do have the ability to adjust our plans as these change, but this is trying to both match up with what the state expects is going to happen with the grid and what will be available, and then also our own goals for our own internal JPA. So just a quick overview of the process. So it starts at the state level. There's a variety of state agencies that are involved who develop sort of a set of assumptions and templates for what the grid and what the overall load growth and resource availability will be over the next 10, 20 years. That also involves what those resources are expected to cost, which resource types might or might not be available based on transmission constraints and technology improvements over the course of time. And then they come up with sort of an expected future grid composition, which impacts what our own portion of what we submit into that IRP might do. So for instance, if we're planning to put in resource types that they assume are really readily available and a lot of people already have, it would impact how often those resources are able to actually generate solar, for instance. We then get a series of templates and requirements, and we develop a narrative, which is the board packet, as well as some Excel spreadsheets that feed into the summary tables such that are presented in that narrative. And those backup calculations are really getting into the reliability of the portfolio we're submitting, whether it's meeting our sort of portion of the overall greenhouse gas reductions and how renewable it's submitted. Then we submit that and board approval. The state then takes all those plans from individual LLCs and creates a statewide system plan. And then that informs grid planning, for instance, state ISO and system operator inform their transmission plan in terms of all the LLCs wanted resources from a certain location, a certain type of resource to make the plan. This is a numerical summary of the state's sort of initial portfolio in the left column. And then the middle column shows if we were to just take our percentage share of each of those resources. And then on the right is our plan that we're submitting here in our IRP. Generally speaking, our approach with developing our set of resources here was to start with that middle column as kind of a baseline. And then make some minor adjustments where based on our experience in the market and sort of goals and priorities and board directions we've gotten in the past, for instance, geothermal, to adjust some of those assumptions a little bit. So the key ones that I wanted to call out were if you compare the middle column to the right column, we are assuming a slightly higher proportion of geothermal energy. Up row there. We are assuming slightly less in terms of wind, both in state and even more so out of state. That's based on we've tried running RFPs and there's not a lot of wind out there that we've been able to even see bid in. And then to kind of make up the balance, solar and storage projects are more readily available. And the third component that we have is here. The different types of storage, whether it's 4-hour, 8-hour, or 12-hour, they serve the same purpose, and it's just similarly a matter of what we've seen people bid in. The bottom right note there on the right side just comments on how the numbers here may seem very large in terms of the number of megawatts of each type. This is going after 2045, and there is a lot of assumed load growth at the state level that we have to bake into our plan. Everyone else does as well. So our load is projected to almost double by 2045. And that accounts for a large portion of these resources. In the plan, we did comments saying, well, that hasn't been our experience over the past couple of years. There's a long time between now and 2045, but we did provide some context on how these needs to be reduced if our load growth is more consistent with recent experience that we've had. So the next two slides, we're going to go into the two views of the outputs of our sort of plan to put it through the modeling. The first one here is looking at the renewable content and the emissions reductions. So the top left graph is showing just a single point in time picture of what our annual renewable generation looks like according to the plan in 2025. The majority of it is coming from solar. There is some from in-state and out-of-state wind. Those are the two blue colors. The gray is geothermal. And then just wanted to note that battery storage shows up as a negative. When you're looking at it on an annual level, you charge the batteries and then you discharge them, and there's some inefficiency involved in that. You charge it more than you end up getting discharge it. And so it shows up as a negative. The bottom table that speaks to the emissions reductions requirements there. There's a sort of total target emissions for the state level by 2045, and our proportionate share of those reductions for each of these subsequent years is the top row there. And then when you sort of run through the model, the bottom row is what our plan is showing. You'd expect ours to be below the targets here, especially given that we have a goal of reducing our emissions more and getting to 100%. And then finally, this is a bit of a difficult graph to view, but I think it's just important to understand. The other component to the IRP and our requirements under that are to do our part to maintain grid reliability. And the way that the IRP looks at this is it looks at the most stressed hours that you're expected to see over the course of a year, and what our sort of proportionate share or contributions to that stress period would be. So the black line here is showing what the current assumption is around our load and how that would contribute to sort of reliability. All the bars underneath it then are showing the buildup of the resources we have procured. If you look at 2026, and then are assuming to plan to procure over the course of the next 20 years to contribute to that overall sort of peak stress period for the grid. And it's unintuitive in the sense that the megawatts you see here are different than the number of megawatts that we're actually procuring. And that is especially true, for instance, for solar, where a given number of megawatts of solar, its contribution to helping in those really stressed hours can be a lot lower, 10%, compared to the sort of total potential capacity. You'll see the bars kind of grow over time. That's showing sort of a series of procurements we would do: solar, storage, and then eventually the red bars are the geothermal. However, I think it is worth noting that the sort of base case assumption here shows that there would still be some need for gas as a reliability component to meet the grid's reliability needs. And just intuitively to connect that to the previous slide, the renewable portfolio standard component and renewable component is looking at it on an annual basis. And so we would have enough renewable generation to meet our annual renewable need, but for very specific stress periods to clean firm gas or geothermal or nuclear or other sort of 24/7 resources, and to serve it out, I guess, a much greater sort of relative contribution. Our hope would be to find more geothermal resources to replace more of that gas. If we were to assume that in this plan, we would be taking sort of far more than our proportionate share of the total assumed geothermal that the state is expecting. And so we're continuing to find ways to advance geothermal, but this is kind of a conservative case of being optimistic in terms of how much geothermal we can get, but not overly. That was the last slide that I had. But sort of, I guess, to close it out, it meets the reliability target and met the RPS and the emissions targets from the previous page. And so there's a huge area that goes behind that. Are there any questions?
You made something very complicated, feel very simple for us, thank you. It is, appropriate for us to, plan to meet the state requirements, but from what you described, it sounds like you also included a bit of narrative in there explaining where we think that there should be some flexibility.
Yeah, the narrative drafts has various places where you could either comment on places where our plan is different from state's overall expected plan. So in some places we said, here our geothermal is slightly higher than what was assumed, so that's our portion share of the state plan. There's a section at the end for lessons learned where we talk about our recent experience in the market and limitations of certain resource types. So there, and then the load growth we did comment on certainty and what that load growth will end up being. Part of that could be how many data centers there are that end up in California. A large part of that is also EV uptake, whether more things will electrify over the course of time, like heating. So we did sort of comment on those areas as well, trying to stick largely to the state.
Okay, for walking us through that for your, go ahead and move on to.
Yeah. I just wanted to remind the board that you are considering the adoption of resolution 2026.
And I would love to hear our motion.
So
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, please vote.
Board Member Savage? Board Member Baltazar? Aye. Board Member Canal? Board Member Joyce? Board Member Bender?
Yes.
Chairman Lund?
Yes. Thank you. That finishes up that item. We'll move on to our final items and the adoption of our budget for 2026.
And thank you, Chair and Board. I'm going to turn this over to our CFO, acting CFO, Amy Stern.
Thank you, Amy Stern, CFO. I spoke to you a month ago and presented a preliminary budget. Slide. Where I showed results through February 2026. Since then, I also met with the Community Advisory Committee and walked through the same presentation, answering their questions and addressing any changes they might have proposed, but there weren't any significant changes. And now we're here to present the budget for your approval, but also showing the forecast for the year through with actual financial results through April instead of through February. I know this slide is a little hard to see, so let me walk you through it. The left three columns are actual through April. The right three columns are the forecast for the full year. About 2/3 of the way down is the summary. So year-to-date actual through April 30th was a $53.4 million change in that position. That compared to a year-to-date budget the same period through April of $27 million. And the forecast for the full year now is about $59.4 million compared to a budget of $35 million. That forecast of $59.4 million is slightly better than it was presented at the last board meeting, but relatively close. And the full year forecast is for case liquidity on hand in June 30th at 112 relative to a budget of 81. Got through the primary changes for very finicky. For the full year, just to give you some context, I mentioned that the full year change in that position is $59.4 million, which is $23.5 million above budget, with an ending year-end positive net position of 80.8. Revenues are slightly below budget, just 2.1 million, but energy expenses are expected to be $22 million below budget. Most of that is because we planned for a contingency of 10% energy expenses for this fiscal year, and that was largely not needed. Other components are slightly above and some slightly below budget, but again, the contingency not needed was the main reason for the amount below budget. And other expenses outside of energy are expected to be $2.2 million below budget. And they will total about 2.9% of revenues, relatively low percentage and definitely low relative to maybe most other CCAs. Questions on the forecast? Okay. So now I'll turn to the budget detail for the coming fiscal year. Again, apologize for the small font, but rates in the budget, we have assumed no change in rates for the current fiscal year, as well as for the 5-year projection, which I will show on the next year at the end of this presentation. I want to note that Cal CCA is projecting that SDG&E will have significant generation rate decrease, even though we're not planning at this point to change our rates. You heard from Mr. Lindell a while ago about the 7.5% change in rates or increase in rates. I think that's largely on the distribution side, and wires and things that go into the distribution costs, which definitely affect customer bills. But again, the most recent projection is that SDG&E will lower its generation rates. We can't really say that that's what will happen, because we've seen a lot of volatility in prior years when they say they're going to go up and they end up going down, or vice versa. The revenue assumption for the year assumes that we will continue the rate credit, that we have rate relief credit, and built into the original assumptions is a maximum of $800,000 a month through December 2026. The impact of the current 150 or so customers is way well below that level, but we have built in that assumption in case there was an adoption for that. We have assumed for conservatism, no load growth. You heard from Dan a few minutes ago that we haven't seen a lot of load growth, but it has been less, up to about 0.5% a year, we're saying. We have not built in any load growth for conservatism. If we saw 0.5%, then our revenues might be slightly above what we have assumed. That will probably be above what we've assumed because the rate credit, we probably won't use all that rate credit that's assumed. We have assumed that customer mix and usage are all flat. It's very hard to predict any change. We're not seeing a lot of significant change. On the programs budget, again, this is a repeat of last month. We're targeting to get to 3% of cost for programs over the next 5 years. Other CCAs are 3 to 5%. And we're going to step into that level where we've assumed in this coming fiscal year, $500,000 of programs, expenses for programs, and growing over the next 5 years to 11.7 million, which is about 3% of revenues at that time. But the board will, we're not adopting those expense levels at this point. We're only adopting, or you're only adopting the amount of expenses for FY27. We're just giving an outlook on what that likely would go to. Staffing, Greg mentioned this, but we've assumed that we have 17 positions today, and we've built in 4 positions into the budget for the coming year. There's a similar slide to last time. Energy costs, again, we've assumed 10% contingency into the budget, which works out to be about $25 to $28 million per year over the next 5 years. If we don't need it, then obviously that goes right back into our net position, the same as it did this past year. And for FY information, we have assumed NAV expenses, which are customers that have solar on their roof. we're assuming 20% growth in FY 27 over the 26 estimate. Just FYI understand what that number means. In FY 25, we saw 40%. In FY 26, we're expecting the growth to be 40% again. But we are expecting that to drop down over the next few years. So we've assumed 20% for the next 2 years and then 10% growth per year in the following 3 years after that. Anyway, click this. For other energy costs, we've assumed for RA, I think I mentioned this last time, that we had to buy resource adequacy 2 years ahead when prices were high. We're still feeling the effect of those costs into this fiscal year, similar to base energy costs where we try to buy well in advance so that we have predictable costs, but that has cost us at this point some costs relative to buying in the market because prices have come down significantly. It's hard to expect that would be that they would remain low, but they have remained low for at least the last year. Surprisingly low, and it's hard to believe that they'll stay that way, but I'm in business of predicting. Just trying to, what we try to do is have predictable costs so that we know we won't spend any more than what we're budgeting. Renewable energy costs are expected to be higher, but that's not because of buying those costs in advance. It's more because our renewable energy percentage is going up each year over the next 5 years. So it's calendar year 26 with a 55% growing in our plan to be up to 90% in calendar year 31. We have assumed in our budget, as we do every year, we've been accruing 1% of revenues as a bad debt expense. That reduces our revenues by 1% and allows us to any types of write-offs or bad debts. We've already accrued for them. However, our arrearages and for slow collections by customers has continued to remain low. And we've asked Christina Bird, who just joined us a month ago, who's done some work on this, to talk to you a little bit about what our arrearages have been. And we talked about this as board before, but I wanted to give you the most current information and a view of what's really happening.
All right, thank you. Christina Bird, Finance Manager with CEA. Sorry that these numbers are also small. So I just want to give an update on our arrearages. Okay. Okay. So I just want to provide an update on current arrearages. So this has been a topic of conversation recently. So this information comes from an arrearages report that you previously saw from February of 2026. So we've updated all of this information as of June 9th. So this comes from a report that lists out customer accounts on each individual line, and then we have columns for each of these different aging buckets. So you see the 31 to 60, 61 to 90, and so forth. So there was a little bit of confusion around customer accounts versus outstanding balances before. So we split this out into two different tables. So table 1 at the top, again, I apologize if the numbers are a little small, but this is a count of actual outstanding balances across the entire report. And then the dollar amounts that makes up each of those aging groups. So that means that if a customer account has a balance in multiple aging groups, which many do, we're counting those balances in each one of those aging groups. So this is really each occurrence. And table 2 on the bottom is actually a count of those customer accounts that have a balance within any of these aging groups, just counting the customer themselves, and then breaking that down by the city. So at the bottom, we wanted to point out, we did a little bit of a filter on this data, just to see of those 39,000 active account holders, How many of them are not on a payment plan and haven't made a payment in the last 90 days? And so of those 39,000 active accounts, it was only 15,859 that are sort of disengaged with these balances. So that's about 40%, and that indicated that about 60% of our active account holders are making payments on these balances. Yeah. So the previous data took a closer look specifically at 91 plus days past due. So we have the top table here that lists the total number of account holders. So again, not outstanding balances, but just account holders that showed up on that arrearage report in any of those aging buckets that are past 91 days. So if they have a balance in multiple different aging groups, we're only counting them once here. So we've broken this down by city just for the 91 plus past few days, and then are comparing that and taking a percentage compared to the total residential CEA customers for that city. So I do want to note that previous data that was presented with these numbers, it actually included commercial accounts in that total. So we're taking a comparison of residential accounts to the total customer base. So we have filtered those out here. So the percentage is now just active residential accounts as they make up a percentage of the total residential base. So the bottom table underneath is similar to what I just talked about on the first slide, but a focus here on specifically active accounts in this 91 plus past due group. And so we're taking a look at who has not made any payments in the last 90 days and they're not on the payment plan. So you can see of those 27,000 or so active accounts that are in this group, 13,416 have not made a payment in the last 90 days. It's just short of 50%. And that makes up 5.94% of the entire customer base for CEA residential customers. All right. So the third slide here takes a look at that first table from the first slide that again is focused on outstanding balances specifically. So this is the count again of all of those outstanding balances on the top table. And then the bottom two are breaking out balances specifically under $19.99. So the purpose of this slide is just to talk about write-offs. So this current CEA collection policy, section 5.3, states that any overdue CEA charges totaling $19.99 or less, which have not been paid by the customer and are no longer being collected by SDG&E, may be considered bad debt and written off. So what I did was broke out how many of these outstanding balances of that total are actually under that $19.99 threshold. So it is about 26% of that total under $19.99. But we are taking a look at this policy and considering the potential of increasing that threshold and what that would look like if we changed it to $49.99. And that pushes that up to 65% of all of the balances. So change the policy. Obviously that changes the count of these balances, but the total balance that makes up is a fraction of a percentage of CEA's total revenues. All right, so this is just a quick update summary of all of the data and the specific numbers that we wanted to focus on. So we saw that there was a total of 151,144 active residential balances past 30 days outstanding. So those balances are made up by 39,225 active residential account holders. And that's because many account holders hold balances in more than one of the aging buckets. So narrowing down that data even further, there's only 15,859 of those 39,000 or so accounts, or about 40%, that are not on a payment plan and have not made a payment in the last 90 days. So about 60% of our active customer base do appear to be engaged in making payments towards these balances. 27,406 active residential account holders or only 12.1% of the current residential CEA customer base have a balance that's 91 plus days past due. And 51% of those customers are either on a payment plan or are making payments towards the balances. And then regarding write-offs, 26% of all of the active outstanding account balances are less than $19.99. And they do fall into our current collections write-off policy. If that were raised to $49.99, that would bump that number up to about 65% of all of our outstanding balances for active accounts. And then finally, back to the slide that Andy presented before this, we've been accruing 1% of revenues as bad debt expense for accounting and auditing purposes. So as mentioned, the total balance for all of these write-offs, even at the higher threshold, isn't even 1%. So we definitely have adequate accruals to cover any bad debt or write-offs.
Question about that. I was at least one of the people who asked for this, so I thank you for doing it. I would very much like to get a copy of all the slides that you just presented on arrearages. I found it interesting when you refiltered. I know in our case in Delaware, you had us at about 90%. Now you got us down to about 3 something, which actually tracks our utilities.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see you figured that out, because that was really anomalous when that first came across. How many days can you be in arrears before SDG&E disconnects your service?
Do you remember that? I think it's 140 days, I think is a number I remember, but don't, above all, I'll take it back to it for sure.
Well, and again, are you assuming that what percentage of these people are you assuming have moved or no longer, they're in arrears, but they're no longer taking power on an account? Do you know that number?
Well, those would be accounts that would be closed.
Okay,
If
so
they're no longer taking power from CEA and or SDG&E, they would be closing.
so those that you're reporting that are past due are still active. I mean, I can't speak for everybody here, but I might when I say we've heard at every meeting for the last 6 months, electricity is too darn high. Please help us. And I'm very worried. I know in our city, we have, strangely enough, we have about a 5% below the poverty line in Delaware. These are people that tend to be elderly. They tend to be widower on a fixed income, Social Security or whatnot. I'm very, very worried. Who's looking out for them, who's trying to make sure, and then I see 40% that aren't on any payment plan. Is that just because they're willfully ignoring it after we put on one? Or has there been not enough outreach to give them the option to get on one? Because I just don't want to see people get cut off. I think that would be the worst thing going into a really hot summer, the worst thing in the world.
Well, CEA has never turned power off of any customer. And one of the reasons these amounts and counts have grown in number of days, and we've also had sort of differing filters of the data over the last few months, is because the number just keeps growing and growing and growing because we don't shut anybody up. And we haven't shut anybody up. And we're continuing to look at this data, and the 1999 and the 49.99. There's not, what we're considering is just writing off the amounts and not worrying about even collecting them and not reporting on them, but it doesn't change. But what that will do is just change the reporting, but it's not going to change whether we're turning anybody's power off or not.
Yeah, I understand you're doing this. I'm coming at it for real people.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the only one up here that's worried, but I'm very worried.
Yeah, well,
One thing I would want to point out is that SDG under CPUC rules cannot cut off power to somebody who's enrolled in care, para, medical baseline. So oftentimes these people that are really struggling, that can't pay their bills, are enrolled in those programs, and they cannot have their power turned off.
And we don't have appreciation for how that.
We haven't looked at how that data melds with those customers in terms of what the counts are.
I'd love to get the slides, so I thank you.
Any other questions on? Okay, so the final slide is what we're asking the board for approval. On the left-hand column in orange is the current year forecast that matches to the prior year-end forecast that we had. And then the proposed budget is on the right side, $378 million, $378.5 million of revenues, with a change in that position, 3/4 of the way down of 28.3 million. Again, remember that that includes a $25 million energy contingency. We hope that we don't need it, but the baseline of costs is based upon the current projection of costs for all the different variables in the energy costs. And then we put in a $25 million contingency. If we didn't need any of the contingency and needed a little bit of it this past year, even in a low cost environment, the change in that position would be in the $50 million plus range.
Thank you, Andy. Any further questions from the board?
Oh, sorry, one more item. Just for your information, here's a 5-year outlook for energy costs based upon many of the same assumptions: forecast of energy costs, forecast of revenues, and an assumption of $25 million, or $25 to $28 million a year in contingency. And you can see that the change in that position is 28 million, increasing 56, 58, 59, and 37 million. But again, those are just for an outlook on where we think we might be if everything held together, holds true. But the only approval here for the board is the first column, which is the proposal. That really is the best.
Well, I appreciate your hard work on this. Thank you so much. This is showing that we're in a pretty good position. I am particularly pleased that we are able to implement a rate relief credit while being in this position. I mean, likely we'll have some of those allocated funds for the rate relief credit returned to us because it's not going to be fully enrolled. I'm so pleased with that. And, things are uncertain for a lot of our customers. Economic instability is really high at this time. I completely agree. Member Spells is a huge concern of mine as well. That's why I think it's so important that we're starting to build in these community-based programs, right? Starting at 1% per year to 3% per year, very conservatively, starting to develop those programs. We're offering rate relief. I recently had discussions with Greg and the rest of the staff about CARA and FARA, and understanding that, especially for a CARE program, that 100% of those who are eligible are enrolled. Is that correct? Like, I understand.
Yeah, it's actually maximum enrollment.
We have a maximum enrollment in those programs, and it's still not enough, right? For many of our neighbors, especially those in the middle, who might be falling through the cracks. That's why I think it's so important for us to, as staff has diligently demonstrated and followed our instructions over the past year, start to build in some more of those community programs. And I really support the work that we're doing. I would love to, have my board on board with this. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the budget for 26-27, but I'd have to hear your comments and your thoughts.
I can second. I do have a couple of questions and comments. Thanks for the presentation. And really appreciate all the updates, and I definitely see that we've moved in a positive direction. So really appreciate that. In terms of the conversation that we're having around, just rates and making sure that folks have the ability to continue to, just have some help as they're moving along. I guess question in terms of the types of outreach that we do. I know sometimes, at least from other agencies, and maybe we're doing the same thing and I haven't received it, but I'm just curious in terms of like reminders for folks, hey, you know, your bills due, if it isn't getting paid, and then of course what that follow-up looks like. And then of course, if somebody does qualify or does need that help, what the process looks like to get them situated with something.
Yeah, our outreach to this point has been focused mostly on social media as well as information that we put out for special webinars like we did last month. We are looking at other ways to get out to those people and communicate with them, and whether or not that's direct mailers or something to that effect that might have a little more disability. We're still exploring those options, but right now we know it's a focus of ours, of the board has expressed concern, and we're trying to get the word out to people about what they can do and how they can save some money or get on payment plans or things of that nature. So we're continuing to explore all options, but we're not leaving anything off that potential table. So.
If I may, I think it would be really interesting, and I'm sure the experts, but I'm just thinking out loud here. But one of the things that I wonder if there is whatever email notification that goes off with regards to the bill at the end of that email or paper copy, there's some sort of like verbiage, obviously we'll get legal, but some sort of verbiage that could go in that says if you do qualify or if you need help, here's a way to get in touch, or here are the options. I just think, like you said, if there's a way to make it more visible to folks, hopefully they have the ability to then see that. I think sometimes if folks don't know where they need to look, it's a little bit harder to find, but meeting people where they're at, if that is that communication that's already going out, if we can just even have 2 lines that says this is where you can go, I think that would be helpful. So I just wanted to make that plug, but yeah, thank you.
As an alternate member, I don't come to a lot of meetings, and so I'm just kind of curious, Andy, thank you for the presentation, it was great. And the budget does definitely seem like it's in a pretty healthy position. You had mentioned that CEA has never turned off anybody's accounts to the CEA. This is an honest question that I don't know. Does CEA have that capability to turn off somebody's
We can't turn it off, but we could probably request SDG to a customer. But I don't, we wouldn't do that, and we hope that they're not doing it either, but we can't control when they do that.
So they're not just looking at that through a different lens.
I don't believe they're doing it.
Okay, well, and thanks for clarifying. Not that I would ever advocate that somebody's power does get turned off, but are there other sources of revenue to cover some of these programs that we're talking about, or covering folks who are not paying? Or does it come out of is it basically coming out of the other ratepayers?
This slide shows a projection that I guess the number to focus on is the day's liquidity on hand as a measure of cash that we would project to have. If you look at the bottom, and I know you're alternate member, so maybe you hear some of this. I'm happy to go through it again, but just in case. We're proposing, I think we're at 116, I think for the 112 we projected for the end of the year for days liquidity on hand. This is showing a proposed budget of getting to 130 at the end of next year. If we don't need all that contingency, then we'll probably be someplace higher than that, 140 to 150. I haven't done the math. We're trying to get to a place as an organization where we can qualify for an investment grade credit rating, which will get us access to lower energy costs and better terms with energy suppliers. To get that, we have to be in the 250 to 280, 180 to 210 range on a predictable basis. We will be there. We're projecting to be at 203 at the end of the following year. Again, the contingency is built in, so it's likely that we could be in that 200 plus range in 12 to 15 months if everything works out. We're projecting that potentially we might be at 300 or 350 in 3 or 4 years. The board has the option to slow down that path to an investment grade credit rating by lowering rates, because what drives that is the rates that we have at the top line, which are all of the revenues come from customer revenues, customer rates. So at any time, and what we assume here is that rates don't change over the next 5 years. But the board has the option, either now, to lower rates, and pass those along to all customers, not just customers that might be suffering, but all customers, and slow down the pace that we can get to that investment grade credit rating, or wait until we get a little bit closer in the year after this, and then reduce rates from the current price we are, which would pass along lower rates to all customers as well.
Sorry, I understood the question, part of the question was, the revenues that we have are largely ratepayer funds. So as far as sources of revenues that we might potentially use for other programs, there is investment income that we have on our reserves. However, I think it would be questionable to use, even those are derived from ratepayer funds, to use those funds to pay down debts of other customers. It would likely be an inappropriate use of ratepayer funds. The interest earning on those funds is a little different bucket of money that potentially might have a different set of circumstances, but those are primarily our two sources of funds. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend using those funds to help offset the arrearages of customers in need.
It's, not advocating for any of it, just trying to get a little bit smarter for myself about this. But I served, for those that don't know, 8 years on a water board, and it's very similar, but we had very similar discussions around the folks that needed some assistance with their water bills. But I do know there's a lot of folks that come to our council meetings and talk about electricity rates and gas and other sources of energy. And there are a lot of people that are struggling out there. But there's also a lot of our customers, I would imagine, who are paying their bills, but are having a really hard time paying. And so when other folks don't pay their bills, what I was asking is there any like state or federal sources of revenue that are kind of helping to offset those who don't? Ultimately, if we stick on the same plan with that we have with our days of liquidity goals that you just presented, ultimately those folks that are maybe not going to the grocery store because they have to pay, because they feel that obligation to pay that electric bill, right? That bill is going to continue to go up for them because they're going to be covering the cost for those other folks that are not paying. Is that accurate assessment?
I guess largely, yes, but it's such a small, we're talking about a lot of the amount of people, the amount of money that's actually not being paid is so small that it doesn't really going to impact rates at all. It isn't going to really impact, even if we covered all of the costs of people that hadn't been able to pay or weren't able to be on payment plans, it wouldn't really, we already showed that it's less than, we're accruing 1% for bad debt, and the amount is less than 0.5% probably, just guessing at a number of people that aren't paying. That's not going to really change rates that much by, our rates are generating $380 million of revenues, and 0.5%, even if you say that, is just a very small number. It's not going to really change rates across the board.
That's interesting perspective. Thank you.
If I could, I just wanted to add that the SDGE bill, and as we know, our bill is part of the SDGE bill that comes to our customers, currently has language on the bills about payment plans and other resources to take advantage of. It's not the best, I would say, it's not most apparent language on the bill. We are looking at potential for bill inserts. That is a cost. And in fact, one of the costs that SDG has was reported is proposing to increase for CCAs to do bill inserts, but we're looking at those kinds of options as well to get this information out about payment plans or other resources for customers who are struggling to pay their bills.
Thank you.
It's very good that most people feel very obligated to carry this expense, even though the time is very challenging for us. So it's just, I just want to very briefly say, having been on this board for
I've been here for a while and coming back in for a budget. This is a pretty good budget. Not here before, so this, so as an organization, I want to say congratulations. In a space where you're looking at these numbers, and I wish you all the best of luck finding ways to make it as affordable as possible. Get to where we're trying to go. Our people.
All for your comments. I'll also just, agree and get glad that we have that 1% built into this budget, acknowledging that arrears do happen. The cost of doing business, is at times our customers will not be paying, and from what I understand, SDG does turn lights off. And they have a motivation to turn lights off on the generation side of things. We are not pushing for our late paying customers to get their lights turned off expeditiously, but we also do acknowledge that, 0.5%, 1% of non-payment, it is included in our budget, but thankfully it is not such impact that it's affecting other customers. Now, to members of the public that might be listening, let's be thoughtful about our protests and everyone, continue to pay your bills on time. We are looking for alternatives. That's the wonderful thing about this organization being community choice candidates. We are not building into our budget any stakeholder payouts. We are lucky in that way that we can return all of our revenues back into something that is for the public good. So I'm really pleased with this budget. I agree with Joyce that we're definitely in a better position than we ever have been. It looks like we're projected to continue to do a sustainably good job to provide renewable energy to our customers. With that, I think we do have a motion and a second. There are no further comments. Let's go ahead and approve this budget today.
Board Member Spelling. Board Member Buckton. Aye. Alternate Board Member Smell.
Yes.
Alternate Board Member Jones.
Aye.
Chairman Lopez.
Yes. All right, that is our final item for today. So we will next meet on July 30th here. And again, hope everyone has a wonderful Independence Day. It's good to see you all.
Good. So did I understand correctly, we do not have it?
As far as I understand, unless there's something very pressing to be added to the agenda, we are not expecting to meet, but we do have it already scheduled.
It has not yet been canceled, but we are looking to potentially cancel it. So I'll let you know as soon as I know.
I think I just hit on that one.
I would just request for next year, maybe hold the different councils on when they go dark, because a lot of us go dark in July. So that doesn't inconvenience staff and their vacation plans, very good at that.
So your benefit members, city of also goes start in July. I think that the staff has looked at this, and unfortunately, majority of member cities are dark in August. Is that right? So we do prefer the majority.
The last time we looked at it,
So I'm already doing August currently, but I'm gonna try to get the change.
Thank you for the feedback. Everyone have a great day.